My name is Gareth Haddock. I am 45 years old and I was diagnosed with Ewing's sarcoma. It was a cancer I went through and I survived. In 2006 I was working out at my local gym and I found basically a little bump underneath my armpit, and it was quite suspicious, and I thought maybe I might have just pulled a muscle. However, I followed it for a few days, each day sort of just, touching this little bump underneath my armpit, and then finally asked my wife to, just to see if it was there and to make sure that it wasn't just my imagination. And she looked at it and she felt it, and she said, yeah, something's there. And so I think that was the first dose of the reality that something might be there and maybe it shouldn't belong. My next instinct then was to go to my family doctor, and we had a look at it again, and he felt it, and he said it was there. And again, it was something about just the size of probably a small hazelnut. And so we looked at it a bit further. He said, why don't we get an ultrasound and do some blood work? And we did. And so at that point, this was July 2006. We went into probably August, and we got the results from the blood work, and it was an ultrasound. And at that point, we realized that it probably was just a cyst. That's what we thought. So over the next month and a half, I'm a high school math teacher. I was teaching, and it was underneath my right arm. Being a math teacher, I do a lot of board work, and I just felt something growing. And so I went back to my doctor and I said, if it's a cyst, it's getting in the way, let's get it out. And after that, he said, well, we have to go to a surgeon. And so I went to a surgeon, and then she said, before we cut it out, we should maybe do a biopsy. I had to wait a few days, I guess, after the biopsy, but I went back to the doctor's office, and that's when she said that it wasn't good news, and it was a tumor that was underneath, sort of in my armpit, sort of bicep area, and it was malignant. And at that point, I always got confused with the words malignant and benign, and I thought, well, just wait, is that the good one or the bad one? And I had to ask her, I said, is that the bad one? And she said, yeah, it's cancer. When I had the diagnosis with the doctor, the next thing I had to do was tell my wife, and she thought, again, it was just going to be a routine appointment where we were going to figure out a date to deal with this cyst. And I went to my wife's place of work, and I didn't even have to say anything. She knew that things weren't good just by the expression of my face. We'd been together at that point probably about 19 years, so she definitely was reading my mind that things weren't good. And all I said is, it's not good. She at that point instantly left work. We went home, and you really don't have too many words to say. You basically cry. And we found the safest place for us to cry was our oldest boy's bunk bed, his bottom bunk, and we basically just cried and fell asleep out of sheer exhaustion. And we probably slept for about 2 hours. It was that emotionally overwhelming. The reality is, though, at that point we had 1.5-year-old twins, and we had an older child, and we had to carry on with life. And so as much as getting the cancer diagnosis at 11 o'clock in the morning, you basically had to be ready to pick up the kids from school at 3:30. My parents live far away, and the same with my wife's parents, and at that point we just carried on with life at 4 o'clock that day. sort of put cancer in the back burner. The hardest point was definitely not knowing really what sort of cancer you had, how much it had spread. There were so many unknown questions, or unknown answers to questions, and I was keenly interested in getting in contact with the oncologist. That did happen. He had definitely done some good research and basically told me the sense of where things would go and what sort of cancer I had. And he said it was Ewing sarcoma, and my next question was, are you going to treat me or are you going to cure me? And he said, we aim to cure you, and that's all I needed. I just needed a bit of hope. I think people underestimate the power of hope, and so he said we'd like to see you teaching this time next year. And I kept that thought in my mind. And I had some other questions about my cancer, because I said, do you see many types of this cancer? And he said the most recent time, or the latest he had seen it, was when he was in medical school. So it's a rare cancer, but it was an interesting cancer. And at that point he made a good decision to send me on to Kingston, where again I worked with a wonderful team of doctors. You pull in all sorts of energy, and for me, faith was one of them. We were going to a local church, and one of the things we did in the church service was the pastor had people stand up and say, hey, if you're going through some pain, if you're going through some medical issues, stand up and we'll pray for you. And people put their hands on you, and they prayed, and I stood up because people knew I had cancer. And the interesting thing is, when that happened, and again I've fallen in and out of faith a lot, but for that moment when I was standing up, I felt like I was like made of steel. When I did get to Kingston in December of that year, I met a great doctor, and I think one of the most, I guess, motivating, or I don't know, I guess the right word is, again, it was the whole idea of hope was when I was getting another biopsy underneath my arm. His nurse put her hand on my shoulder and said, it's going to be okay. And I think I mean, cancer people in the early stages of cancer need to know that. We need to know things are going to be okay. And it could be okay, the next week's going to be okay, it could be the next year's going to be okay, but we need to know things are going to be okay. And it's that moment that, those are the moments that you can have 100 appointments, but those are the moments that you remember.